l'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
In 2015, almost 200 countries signed on to the landmark Paris Accord, committing to address climate change and its negative impacts. At the helm for Canada, then Environment Minister Catherine McKenna.
This agreement sends to all Canadians that we are in this together to tackle climate change.
She left politics in 2021 and now chairs the UN Secretary General's high-level expert group on net zero commitments and works with governments and private industry on climate change. Catherine McKenna joins me now from COP28 in Dubai. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
You've said that there's zero chance Canada can meet its emissions targets because of the oil and gas industry and what's going on there. What would you like to see in the immediate from Canada in order to try and get back on track?
Well, I mean, it's not that Canada's off track. The targets are 2030 targets. It's just clear that Canada needs to implement key policies. When you look at the oil and gas sector, despite their net zero announcements and advertising everywhere, they're very far from net zero. In fact, they're over 25% of Canada's emissions, the largest sector, and their emissions are growing. So what do we need to see? We need a cap on emissions on oil and gas. That's very clear. For Canada to be able to meet its targets. But I mean, on the flip side, the oil and gas sector has said, including the Pathways Alliance, representing the largest oil sands producers, that they're committed to net zero. So great, do the work. The UN Secretary General asked me to chair a report on net zero to also address greenwashing. And if you say you're net zero, it's not 2050. So that goes for provinces as well. It's not good enough to say, well, don't worry, we'll do the work at 2049. You need to be doing the work now. So emissions need to be going down now, and money needs to be going from fossil fuels to clean. And you just look at the facts, because I think Canadians deserve to know the facts. So if you look at oil and gas in Canada, their emissions are going up. They're making historic record profits that they are giving back to shareholders, largely non-Canadian, by the way, while they demand subsidies from Canadians to clean up the pollution they cause, while Canadians are paying more for heating oil and gas because of the high skyrocketing prices they charge, and they are the major cause of the the climate crisis. So I think that we need to see real action from oil and gas. We haven't. Government definitely needs to ensure that they're doing the work just like everyone else.
We are expecting, I think, the minister to announce a cap on oil and gas potentially this week. Obviously, you've been in that job, and you know how hard it is to get industry doing what you want it to. As you make the point, though, the industry says, yeah, we're on board. How do you get the cap in place and make sure that industry actually follows through?
Look, I mean, it's been clear that there needs to be a legislated cap, so you just actually have to do it. Yeah. I mean, look, things are hard, and there's nothing harder than tackling climate change, but we need to do it with integrity and based on the facts. And oil and gas has not stepped up. You have a choice in life, especially when you're the major cause of the climate crisis. You either make things worse or you actually do your part to actually do the work. And so I think that the cap is critically important. The government needs to move forward on that. At the same time, we need to distinguish between fossil fuel companies whose interests are really making as much money as possible, saving as much money. So you've seen a lot of workers laid off, and they want Canadians to subsidize the cleaning up of their pollution. While, of course, there are communities and workers that we need to be focused on, making sure we support them as we transition to a cleaner future. And those are two very different things. So you've got to do both at once. And I think you just have to be straight up to Canadians. Like, we're in a fossil fuel climate crisis. Oil and gas is the problem. They are not doing the work. So we need to expect them to do the work. I have also been clear, while they make record profits that they're giving back to shareholders, not back to Canadians, we should bring in a windfall tax. We have a mechanism for excessive profits for banks. Well, oil and gas is making absolutely massive profits that they're not returning to the economy. And meanwhile, a large part of inflation is caused by the skyrocketing prices charged by these fossil fuel companies for heating oil and gas.
What do you make, though, right now, Catherine McKenna, of the debate around the carbon tax? Obviously, some of it fueled, forgive me for the pun, by the decision by the government to carve out home heating oil and try and get people onto heat pumps. There is, though, a serious pushback against the carbon tax. Saskatchewan says that we're not even going to collect it anymore. It is, in spite of the crisis, the climate crisis, difficult politically to do these things, perhaps more difficult than it was when you were minister.
Well, I mean, I think, look, once again, you need to be straight up to Canadians. I remember Jean Chrétien saying to me, it was the best piece of advice I ever got in politics, that Canadians are reasonable. Be reasonable. You have to explain that the reason you're putting a price on pollution is it can't be free to pollute, and we need to create the incentives for cleaner solutions. And the carbon price, we need to be clear. If provinces didn't step up, we asked them to, and they had the opportunity to, and many like Quebec and BC are doing that. But if you aren't, there is this backstop that the government has brought in, but all the money goes back such that that most people are better off. That message has to be constantly conveyed, because conservatives are constantly misleading Canadians by making it seem that the cause of inflation or the cause of higher prices has to do with a revenue neutral carbon price where the money goes back to people. That's just not the case. But you do constantly have to be, being very clear to Canadians as to what you're doing. And what's the alternative scenario? The alternative scenario is do nothing. And when you're at COP and you talk to other countries, most countries, European countries, but many other countries have a carbon price. But you've got to fight for good policy, especially in the face of disinformation led by the Conservative Party, led by fossil fuel interests, who actually just want the world to stay the same, but it's not staying the same. It's warming to a degree that is actually threatens our life and lifestyle. And so it makes no sense that we would do nothing. And I think you have to do the hard things in life. Hard things are hard, but you have to do things in a way that are smart. They consider affordability. And that's why I was disappointed when, there was this pause on the carbon price, because the reality is, why are there skyrocketing prices on heating oil in Atlantic Canada, but heating gas at the same time? Mm-hmm. Because of the skyrocketing prices charged by fossil fuel companies. They make historic profits. They don't make life more affordable. They actually make life less affordable for Canadians, and they're fueling the climate crisis. So they have to step up. And unfortunately, they haven't. So that means government needs to create the right incentives, including regulating.
Okay, Catherine McKenna from COP28. Thank you for making the time for us. Appreciate it.
Great, thanks.